Well, I like children. My wife and I have two of them. So we enjoy giving Halloween treats to those cleverly disguised youngsters on come to our door. But it's not Miss America's favorite holiday, is it, girlfriend? No, because she's territorial. And the problem is that when those cleverly disguised youngsters show up at the door, some dogs become reactive aggressive. And then we have chocolate poisoning. In case we haven't met or you don't recognize me in my clever disguise, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm residency trained in veterinary behavior medicine with a long career in general practice. And I always like to say there isn't a whole lot I haven't seen, but I'm always looking. And so if you have any questions about not just behavior of pets, Tony T, whoops, you character, now you've got, well, all right, here, look, Tony, you can have, over here, son. There we go. Oh, Miss America says, my goodness, there's cat food on the seat. Everybody's an opportunist. You know, sort of like those Halloween treats. Oh, and who's here? Cindy. Wonderful. Thank you for coming. It's just great to see you. And by the way, if anybody has had a pet, a dog in particular, although cats can get a little bit wiggy on Halloween too, put it in the comment line and let me know and give me some details, and we'll see if we can understand what's going on and how we can deal with it in the future. Yes, there's more cat treats on my lap here, girlfriend. There. Okay. There. I think we got everybody under control. But you know, with 3 pets, you never know. And oh, Cindy has a question. Carolyn will give me my iPad in a minute so I can read. Yeah, she's working on it. It takes a minute to get that up to speed. Anyway, thank you for everybody for coming. And again, tell me if you've got any of these issues that I'm talking about, because we're going to get to chocolate poisoning as well. Anyway, here's the problem. Dogs are naturally territorial. Their fundamental behavior in our homes is based on how they function in a free living situation where they have to protect their resources. It's not just about their territory, but what's within their territory. So if they have youngsters of their own, one of their primary objectives in terms of life itself, beyond acquiring food resources, is passing on their genetic code. So they're all about protecting their food resources and their youngsters and their breeding females. Of course, in the wild, nobody's spayed and neutered because that would sort of get in the way of passing on your genetic code. So we have our dogs at home, and they're looking at their territory because it's just who they are. And so you have characters coming up to the door in bizarre get-ups, and that causes a problem sometimes. Now, Miss America just wants to bark because, well, that's how you scare off the scary monsters, isn't it? But there are some dogs who get frightened and they get reactive aggressive. And people make mistakes because, you know, nobody like me has told them any different. But if you're opening the door for kids on Halloween, or frankly, anytime somebody comes to your door and your dog's barking, there could be an aggressive event. And it's very easy to be grabbing your dog's collar and reprimanding and saying, stop that, don't do that. Some people spray them with water, which I think is a perfectly excellent idea, but only if your dog catches fire. Reprimands and punishments have no place at all when your dog is reacting out of a normal behavior, like territorial, or if your dog is afraid, or if there's a risk that your dog might actually bite. Not only are you wasting time, but your dog follows your emotional lead and will, if you're agitated in that context, then going forward your dog learns that in that context, he or she is also more agitated. So if you want a calm emotional state in some particular context, it's your responsibility as the leader to model that emotional state. Now, how can you be calm if your dog is wigging out? Thank you, Carolyn. Because, you know, kids in crazy outfits are at the door. Well, we're going to avoid that problem. Is really the only way to go. So, Cindy, my dogs get stressed out on the Halloween with all the Halloween kids outside, and so the only good way. Oh, hello, Martha. Thank you for coming. The only good way is to put your dog in a faraway room in your house and motivate your dog to focus on extracting food from a food dispensing toy, something like a twist and treat. Whoops, it's my special Halloween get up there. Something like this. Yes, Miss America, she says, I've used that before. And I've shown this before. I keep these handy because this is the food dispensing toy that I think is the best, although the best one is the one your dog likes the most. This is called a twist and treat, and you can see there are two halves that are sort of like cavities, and you can put dry food or canned food in them. Excuse me, girlfriend, I'm going to sit on your head while you're trying to eat that cat food that fell down there. And then you can screw it together, leave it gapped apart like that to make it easy if you need to. But if your dog starts to get pretty clever and figure out how to get the food, then you make it more challenging. And if you really want your dog to take a long time after they're pretty clear on the concept, you can put canned dog food in this, stick it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it overnight. And then, if you're prepared for Halloween, then when several hours prior to the kids coming, you withhold your dog's food. So she's food motivated. We're not going to starve him. We're just going to have him focused on surviving, which is very natural, instead of barking his head off at the door. And he's farther from the front door, as far away in your house as you can put him. And the door to that room is closed to dampen the sound. If you want to turn on a noisy fan in there, some relatively loud but soothing music like classical music or through a dog's ear, and you give him something to focus on. And people say, well, how will the dog ever learn to behave properly in a situation like that if you never expose him to it? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me say this about that. When you practice avoidance, you're allowing the circuits in your dog's brain that have carried and stored that information, those reactions to those particular triggers. When we avoid them, we allow those neural circuits to be abandoned. You know the old saying, practice makes perfect. Well, there's a reason for that, and that is that the more you rehearse a behavior or a skill, whether it's athletic or musical or whatever, the more often it's practiced and repeated, the stronger those neural circuits get. They're actually become measurably thicker. And so, on the other hand, you've heard the expression, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, there are certain skills, if you want to call it that, of your dog reacting to the doorbell and kids yelling trick or treat or, showing up in these crazy outfits. And we want our dog to stop reacting to that stuff. Well, we have to abandon the neural circuits that have carried and stored that information so that your dog is less reactive or less skilled at them, if you want to look at it like that. So give your dog a break. There's also a level of kindness there. And if everybody who's with me right now didn't have a great sense of kindness, well, you wouldn't have a pet in the first place, would you? I mean, we have them to love them and to have them as our companions. And we know that they're different than we are. And sometimes it's a good thing to be reminded of just how different they are sometimes. Because none of the human members of your family are at the door barking and raising a ruckus and trying to burst through the screen door. Which brings up another point, is that doors, for our dogs, are what we call an artificial barrier. They're artificial to the dog because they don't understand them. You look at the way dogs live in the wild even today in feral situations. They have their territory, but they have a whole lot of choices. If something scares them, they can create all the distance they need to. I mean, they can just go a mile away if that's what helps them feel better and safer. But, of course, they live with us, which, by the way, they are domestic creatures. They belong in our lives. No debate there. The but is that they don't have the same choices that they would have if they lived in the wild. They live in a building with walls, our house, that have rooms that are sometimes not that big. And if they're outside, there's a fence. And if we go to the door with them on a leash, it's just like having them on a leash walk, they're trapped by the 6-foot radius of that leash. And they know that. And they need to get away, or they need to go check out these intruders, not necessarily aggressively, but they come to their territory, for crying out loud, and that's pretty important to a dog. And so they can't do the normal stuff that they naturally should do, and that frustration can ratchet up their reactive behaviors And for dogs who may be prone to bite, make them more prone to bite than they otherwise would be. So if we think about punishing or reprimanding a dog who's reacting in those situations, well, without meaning to, we've actually set them up for failure. And so let's set them up for success instead. We know Halloween is coming. It's like July 4th. We know when that comes too. So, several hours prior to the arrival of the children, let's withhold food so the dog is food motivated. Let's put it in the far end of the house, turn on some noise, particularly something that might cause a higher level of alpha waves, the calming brain waves that we get with music that is scientifically developed for dogs called Through a Dog's Ear. Google it, Through a Dog's Ear. They also have Through a Cat's Ear. We often recommend that also for pets who have separation behaviors to help calm them. And you can reduce the heebie-jeebies that way. And then you can enjoy the kids. Now, here's something else, and this is a prescription medication. You may have seen me mention this before. I'll show you this to you. Let me turn the camera around. This is called Sileo, S-I-L-E-O. Dexmedetomidine is a medication that's very interesting because it has a different function at different doses. It's been used for a long time by injection as a sedative in veterinary clinics, very safe stuff, but at a much lower dose, like what we have in this gel. Excuse me, girlfriend. It's what's called an oral transmucosal gel because it comes in this syringe and there's no needle, and you put this between the lower lip and the gum in the dog's mouth. Hold her mouth closed for a couple minutes after you've put it in there. They don't object to the taste, and it absorbs across the gum, and in about 20 minutes you have a calmer dog, and they can still operate heavy machinery. No designated driver necessary. So if you want to, knowing from history that your dog is going to be reactive, and you give him or her a dose of Sileo, ask your veterinarian for it. If the doctor does not have it on the pharmacy shelf, it can be ordered. All the veterinary distributors have it. Thank you for the heart. I'm glad this is helpful. And be ready. And you can have it for New Year's Eve. Thanksgiving is coming up. If you're going to have house guests, with everybody wearing a mask, please, and social distancing. Families have been spreading the problem, by the way. And your dog can feel better. And, that's back to the kindness thing, isn't it? We love our pets, and let's make sure that we do everything realistically possible to reduce the stress. And they're less likely to cause a serious problem. And I'm worried about aggression more than most people because, again, I'm a veterinary behaviorist. I'm residency trained. My practice now is all behavior problems, and the most common I see, aggression. And I'm always looking for the triggers, the tip-offs that we might have a problem, and avoidance, really avoidance, and help the pet feel better. And it's sort of an empathy thing too. Let's take a walk in our dog's moccasins for a minute here and realize that, wait a minute, they're a lot different than we are in some ways, aren't they? I mean, there are other people who are a lot different than I am. That's probably fortunate. And so if there are different motivators for a different individual and a different species, some very different motivators and very different manifestations of behavior, and we say, all right, maybe we can understand how this dog is feeling, then we can do things that really help them feel better and cope better. So let's do the best we can to be kind and think ahead on this thing. So food toys for a food-motivated dog and Sileo can be helpful. So what about the chocolate thing? Well, let me talk about that. I've done lots of emergency work in my career, and where I practice and see my behavior cases at the Veterinary Emergency and Specialty Center in Albuquerque, big active emergency department. Well, here's a case I treated a number of years ago at my hospital when I was doing general medicine and seeing some behavior cases. Had a big black lab came in, and this dog, the people said, well, we caught her eating chocolate, and it happened to have been Halloween, and the kids came home with these big baskets, and they were busy celebrating, having pumpkin pie or something, right, Miss America? And they dog got into the basket of goodies. You know, there's something about dogs. I'm only joking when I say this, but it seems like there's a genetic predisposition for being attracted to anything in a cellophane wrapper. I mean, what dog needs to be taught that? But they all seem to know, don't they? And so they'll go after chocolate. And this big old lab was a chow hound, like just about all dogs, but especially labs, and ate an enormous quantity of it. And so these folks, what they had done was they had baked brownies, and they were giving homemade brownies to the kids who came to the door. Well, so anyway, this dog ate a whole bunch of these brownies and was already starting to feel sick. And so these folks were smart. They brought the dog in just as soon as they realized what was going on, and we induced vomiting. And this dog heaved up what we call a Bezor. And a Bezor is a B-E-Z-O-A-R. And it is a conglomeration of stuff that sticks together in a ball in the stomach. And you can have hair Bezors, dogs who eat weeds and grass, can accumulate this stuff over time, and it gradually builds a bigger and bigger ball in the stomach. We call that a Bezor. Well, this dog had a chocolate Bezor, and when we triggered this dog to vomit, and you can use, used to be we'd suggest syrup of ipecac, but you cannot get that darn stuff anymore. Mustard will do it. You can use salt, but that can create a salt imbalance in the body, which can be real trouble. You can use hydrogen peroxide, but mix it with water and don't use very much because that can cause erosions in the mouth. We have medications in the veterinary clinic to give, so we did that. And this big old black lab heaved up this chocolate Bezor, bigger than a softball, but not quite as big as a volleyball. Huge. Well, that wasn't the end of it, because there's plenty of chocolate still left in the dog's stomach. And the trouble with a Bezor is you think, okay, it's all in one place. Well, the trouble is that the dog just gradually absorbs more chocolate off this big ball that's in its stomach, and it reaches very gradually toxic levels. And I'm going to read you some information here I wrote in my newspaper column some time ago, not that long ago. This is all current information. And I put this as a part of what I send to my subscribers every Tuesday morning. And it's what we call a media blog. It's also my newspaper column from the week before. So let me read this to you because I can tell you all these things, but I don't want to leave anything out. So the idea of Halloween is rather appealing. It's fully legal and socially acceptable to assume a different identity. If you are underage, you can arrive uninvited on the doorsteps of total strangers and feign poverty or threaten to trick them if they don't cough up unhealthy snacks. Well, many dogs, being natural scavengers and thieves, which they are happy to lurk in the shadows waiting for their chance to filch junk food that shocks their digestive systems. And dogs are natural thieves. You know, in the wild, they're predators. They'll eat what they kill, but they don't get that lucky every day. Typically, most dogs survive on a day-to-day basis on carrion, just dead junk. And that's scavenging. And, again, just like this big black lab, that plate of brownies was too good to pass up. So a bellyache is unpleasant for dogs. Chocolate consumption is potentially fatal. Whether they devour one piece at a time or raid the whole bag, you have a medical emergency. And, the wait and see thing, if you say, oh, he just got a few pieces of chocolate out of the trick-or-treat box or, ate just half a brownie, I wouldn't wait. I just would not gamble because once they start getting sick, they can get a lot worse and they can die. And I've seen that happen. So, chocolate and cocoa products contain caffeine and methylxanthines. These are substances that we humans can handle with no trouble. Most of us eat chocolate, right? Some of us a lot of chocolate. And we don't have a problem, but it's one of those species differences. They're not little people in furry suits, are they? They're a member of a different species, and a part of empathy is recognizing not just the behavioral differences, but other physical differences, like the inability to safely consume chocolate. So more than its toxicity, chocolate tends to form a big gooey ball in a dog's stomach, making it slow to absorb. Symptoms may not appear for 6 to 12 hours, and that's why you don't do the wait and see thing. Most vomit and have an increased thirst. Diarrhea, bloating, and restlessness are common. And the restlessness has to do with the caffeine that they don't handle, and it just jacks them up. And that's miserable for them. Hyperactivity, excess urine output, staggering, tremors, and seizures. Yeah, really. You or I would not have a seizure. Our dogs can have horrible seizures, and we were starting to get that with that big female black lab. Very sweet dog. It's really hard to see them endure that kind of thing. So dogs with advanced chocolate poisoning have rapid, abnormal heart rhythms. That's right, it can cause what are called cardiac arrhythmias, and it can lead to coma and death. So ingestion of any amount of chocolate warrants immediate treatment, starting with medications to induce vomiting. Activated charcoal and irrigation of the stomach are essential to halt further absorption. And that, of course, is exactly what we did with that lab. We stomach tubed her, gave her a sedative, and rinsed out her stomach with water until it came out clear, and then we added activated charcoal to absorb anything that might have been left behind. Activated charcoal is wonderful stuff. There's nothing new about it, and it's excellent. It always has been. Right, Tony T? Okay, so intravenous fluids, electrocardiogram monitoring are also important. And then, of course, often we have to treat for trembling and convulsions, which in the case of that lab, we gave intravenous Valium, which actually got the job done. So it doesn't take very much. Less than 1 ounce of milk chocolate per pound of body weight is potentially lethal for dogs. 1 ounce per pound, and that's milk chocolate, which, by the way, is a lot less, has a lot less of the caffeine and methylxanthines, which, by the way, are also potentially damaging to the liver. Baking chocolate, unsweetened, is far more potent. 0.1 ounce per pound of body weight can cause seizures and death. So 16 ounces, actually 0.1 ounce. So 16 ounces is a, wait a minute, let me start again. 0.1 ounce. So that's not very much, is it? So if you had a 37-pound dog like Miss America here, that would be 3.7 ounces of Baker's chocolate. Could be fatal, and that's not a lot. So territorial behavior and outright fear are common problems for dogs, a lot of dogs and cats on the big night, and the anti-anxiety gel Cilio can make things better in just 20 minutes. We've talked about that. And by the way, cats can take Cilio as well. It is not approved for cats, but off-label, we know that it works very safely. And there are dots on the plunger of the syringe, and you give 1 dot to a cat. And then for dogs, it's based on their weight. Again, your veterinarian can dispense it. It is a prescription medication. So, create safety for your pets in another room before the hordes launch their assault. A food dispensing toy or a puzzle like a twist and treat stuffed with canned food can focus a cat or dog's brain and on healthy foraging behavior while you happily cave to extortion at the hands of our nation's future. So, is there anything else? Anybody else have a question? It doesn't look like it. I'm happy to answer anything. I'm really glad people join me for these things. I enjoy doing them and teaching people stuff about their pets and bringing out the best in pets and their people. I am sure, although I have no research to support this, that the kindness and empathy that people show their pets is something that practices that emotional state of giving in us, that we can then apply to other people in our lives and bring out their best too. And it can go on from there. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for bringing out the best in your pets and other people as well. And by the way, you can get this video, you can share it with any of your pet-loving friends. Again, put their name on the comment line, or when you get this in your email box on Tuesday, you can just forward the email. If you're not a subscriber, you can go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeff, N-I-C-H-O-L, and subscribe at the bottom of the homepage. Costs nothing. And when you do, I will send you my free at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, which also talks about chocolate poisoning, among many things. Hit by cars, seizures, It covers just about all the primary emergency problems that can occur in cats and dogs. And so, let's work on this thing together. Thank you again for being here. And if you have questions and you didn't bring them up during this Facebook Live, you're always welcome to send them to me on my Facebook page, and I will reply. So have a nice evening, and don't forget to wear your mask, and have a nice time on Halloween. And don't forget to vote, by the way.